I often see at smoking bulletin boards that people use mantras to try to help them stay off smoking. Common mantras that you will often hear from people is like, don't just say no, or you're a puff away from a pack a day, or my favorite one of the bunch is smoking is not an option. And I'll explain why that's my favorite in a second. And people even, and I've seen this at other sites too, where they use never take another puff as their mantra. And you would think like, well, that one shouldn't bother me considering I think I basically coined that phrase. It was something I used in my second Stop Smoking Clinic letter in 1982, and I've just used it in all my letters since then. So it was actually in December of 81, I think, when I first used that phrase. It was never meant to be a mantra, though. It was always meant to be kind of a instruction for a person who wanted to stay off smoking on what they needed to do. In fact, I almost always preface it when I use that phrase of never take another puff is, if you don't want to go back to smoking, never take another puff. If you want to keep your quit going, never take another puff. It's not a demand. It's not a command. It's not something that people are being told they have to do. It's basically, if they want to keep a quit going, what they need to do. But just using it as a mantra by itself, I don't believe is a good utilization of the term, and for any of the terms. I'm going to go back to a second ago. I said my favorite one that I see on the site, like smoking is not an option. And the reason that one has always just been so humorous to me is before I was just operating at Freedom, I was at a lot of boards, and I was, just kind of trying to help out where I could. And I would see people pretty much daily, right? Smoking is not an option. This is how they're keeping their quit. Smoking is not an option. And then the person would disappear for a day or two or a week or a month, and then they came back and they're smoking again, and they need to quit. They need to quit again. They're quitting now, and smoking is not an option. Well, you know what? When they made that comment the first time around, then that smoking is not an option, and then they're smoking the next day or whatever the time period is, well, I think it became pretty obvious pretty quick to anyone reading that, or it should have become obvious, hey, smoking was an option. See, I always believed smokers have options of not smoking, and non-smokers or ex-smokers have the option of smoking. The option always exists. It's one that if people really consider what the options are, I don't think they're going to pursue it. I always tell people there's two good reasons. Once you quit smoking, you have options. There are two good reasons to take a puff. And again, if your option is to is to take a cigarette or a puff, you always have that option. But there's two good reasons to take a puff. There's lots of stupid reasons to take a puff once you quit, but there's two really good reasons. The first one is you decide you want to go back to smoking until it will cripple and then kill you. See, that's an option. And if you take it under those terms, well, you're taking it with informed consent. And if you get off before it cripples or kills you, hey, you get better than you bargained for. If you don't get off before it cripples and then kills you, well, you got exactly what you said you were going to go for. So again, it is an option. The other good reason to take a puff once you quit, and this is my favorite of the two, is you really enjoyed the withdrawal. If any people get into that first day or two or the third day of what it felt like when they were quitting smoking, and they really, really enjoyed whatever the symptoms they were having. If they were really extreme symptoms, they enjoyed them really a lot. If you want to keep withdrawal going, well then, take one puff every third day. It's all you need. You don't need any more than that. One puff on a 3-day cycle, and you can make withdrawal last forever. Those are two good reasons to take a puff on a cigarette. Any other reason that a person takes it, it's wrong, because they're taking it with a short-term of usage idea in their mind or with a limited amount in their mind, and it's not going that way. But again, smoking to a person who's quit smoking has always been an option. It's just an option that I think most people realize they don't want to pursue if they understand the full implication of the option. Again, just saying smoking is not an option is kind of an empty meaning, empty phrase, doesn't say anything. It's, to me, almost like, again, the just say no issue. Just say no. It doesn't give a person the reason of why they're saying no. And if you just use this as your technique of not smoking, is just say no, you could very well walk away from the majority of your thoughts, from the majority of your craves, or whatever you want to call it, depending on the point of time where it's occurring. You could walk away from every one of these events victorious, not smoking because you just said no, but walk away with the attitude of, oh darn, I couldn't have another one. You could walk away feeling total deprivation because you just said no to yourself. It's better in the sense of just not just saying no. What you really want to do is focus on why you are saying no. Give yourself the reasons. Reinforce your resolve when you get the thought for a cigarette of why you don't want to be a smoker. It's not that you're saying no to a cigarette. It's that you're saying no to all of the cigarettes and all the problems and all the implications that go with that cigarette. Then it's a matter of, it's not that you just said no to something that you wanted, it's you said no, and this means something different, to being a smoker again because you don't want to be a smoker again, because you don't want all the problems that went with being a smoker, that went with it in the past when you were smoking, and what would go with it in the future if smoking went on to do what smoking could go on to do. The other phrase, you're a puff away from a pack a day. That one I actually like. That one I think, and again, I could be wrong, I think it was started by smoke enders 20, 30 years ago. When I was first doing programs, they were one of the groups that were around. I was never thrilled with the program itself because they were doing a cut-down approach. They were prolonging a withdrawal. They were meeting once a week for like an 8-week period, which I never thought was the route to go. But the phrase had validity to it because it wasn't basically telling a person not to do something. It wasn't just a matter of saying no. It was really giving them an implication of what would happen, a puff away from a pack a day. So that one, if there's one mantra which is, more acceptable than others to me, that would be the one. I was saying, though, that some people even use my phrase of never take another puff as a mantra. It was never meant to be that, though. It really wasn't. Again, as I said at the opening of this, it was designed, in a sense, to give people what they needed to understand they needed to do to keep a quit going, and that is to never take another puff. But it shouldn't just be used by itself. Again, it really comes down to this point of reinforcing your resolve when you get a thought for a cigarette. You want to take those opportunities when you do have moments where you want a cigarette. You want to take those moments and spend a little time focusing on what really is happening at that moment in time. Why do you want that cigarette? And do you want the other ones that go with it and the problems that go with the other ones? If you take that time, you really will walk away from those thoughts with the attitude, boy, I'm glad I'm not smoking again. If you really think about what the puff would have translated into, it would have been turned into a full-blown relapse. You'd be smoking your old quantity. You'd be smelling like a cigarette again. You'd be spending the amount of money that you were spending on a pack-per-pack basis when you were a smoker. You would be dealing with all of the implications and risks that go with it. If you spend those few seconds just focusing your attention on that idea when you would get a thought, instead of just saying no to it, instead of just using a catchphrase, oh, just never take another puff, if you were to reinforce your ammunition at those moments in time when you get those thoughts, you will walk away from those thoughts like, I'm glad I'm not doing it anymore. And you know what? You probably won't get them as often down the road because you will have a constant reminder going on of a refreshing of your initial reasons for quitting. It's remembering cigarettes how they are. I always point out to my clinic graduates, I don't want them to just think about cigarettes negatively. I want them to remember cigarettes exactly how they were the day they quit smoking. Not what they were like the day they started smoking. They may have liked it that day. I want them to remember what it was like the day they quit smoking. Because there was something annoying enough about cigarettes at that point in time that they wanted out. That they were willing to put up with drug withdrawal to get out. That they were willing to come sit and listen to me for 6 days, and because they wanted to get out. I mean, this was an investment of time. There was an investment of effort. There may have been an investment of pain. But it's because they wanted out of cigarettes. I want them to remember what that was like at the end. See, if you remember cigarettes accurately, if you remember what they were like at the end, you'll realize you didn't want them at the end. See them for what they are. Don't look at them negatively. Look at them accurately. If you analyze what it was like to smoke, what it was like to quit, and what it's like to be off, and you remember all three states accurately, you will realize that one of those states has a far clearer advantage over the other two states. The state of being off of smoking, that will get easier and easier over time. And if you focus your reasons of why you quit on a regular basis, it will stay strong over time. One other point I want to go into on the just say no kind of thing. That one, if that is your technique, if that's the thing you use, it's going to get harder with time, not easier. It will get harder over time. Because what happens to most people once they quit is they really will forget smoking. They will forget every bad cigarette they ever smoked. They will forget the ones that they smoked early on, or the ones that they smoked that they never really enjoyed much to start with or disliked much to start with. There's some cigarettes that are just automatic cigarettes. You smoked them. They meant nothing to you as you were doing it. They were neither good, they were neither bad, they were there. Well, you're going to forget all those cigarettes. You are going to forget the miserable cigarettes, the cigarettes that you lit up, took a puff with, ooh, this is terrible, put it out in disgust. You're going to forget those cigarettes. You're going to forget every negative cigarette you had over time. And then what will happen is you will forget every cigarette except the good ones. And maybe the one you're going to think about at some point is the best one you ever had in your life. You may remember what that cigarette was. And then you're going to tell yourself, oh, just say no to it. Oh, there's one other. I knew there was one other I wanted to say here and I forgot to. The other catchphrase that people use, or that people use as advice to other people, is, well, just think about something else. Again, this one is a useless technique. Just think about something else. Come on. When you're having a thought for a cigarette, you're having a thought for a cigarette. Just trying to think about something else. That's going to get harder and harder over time, too, as you remember the best one you ever had in your life. Again, it's a matter of refocusing your attention at this point. Not of trying to think about something else, but of really trying to think about smoking. Remembering them how they were at the end and realizing you don't want them under those terms again. And if you don't want them under those terms, if you're not willing to be a smoker the way you were, again, the only solution you have to avoid ever being in that state again is to once again recommit and stick to it, to your idea, to, again, your commitment to never take another puff.